hat now representing Dogs Trust, not just ISAE. So I'm going to talk about dog welfare and adoption, a worldwide view, because as well as being a volunteer for ISAE and the council, I am employed by Dogs Trust, and I work in the behaviour team, the central behaviour team in the UK. The organisation also works worldwide and has quite a prevalence in India as well. So why dog welfare? Well, as we've had quite a lot of discussions already today around street animals and homeless animals, and as you know, all you need to do is step outside and you can see dogs on the street who can have different welfare problems, particularly with their health if they're not having enough nutrition or veterinary treatment. And as I'm sure you're aware, rabies is a serious issue still worldwide. It's causing 60,000 people to die globally, and more than a third of those are in India. And fear of rabies and being bitten by a dog can lead to inhumane dog killings. However, it's been shown scientifically that culling doesn't prevent the spread of disease. On the flip side of that, so that might be more of an issue in India, whereas where I come from, working in the UK, our welfare problems can be more around behaviour of the dogs. Once they're in a home environment, then different behaviour problems can arise, and this can lead to them being abandoned so that they end up as a stray, relinquished, so given up to a shelter, euthanized, and it has an effect on their quality of life and the human-animal bond. So the vision and mission of Dogs Trust is working towards the day when all dogs can enjoy a happy life free from the threat of unnecessary destruction. And we've talked already today about necessary and unnecessary, so that leads nicely. And as Dogs Trust worldwide, which I will talk about in a minute, we deliver projects through global partners, so not so much working directly, but funding partners that work in different countries to work positively and sustainably on the welfare of individual dogs, but also on dog populations. So our international work is very much looking at population level, whereas a lot of the work we do in the UK will be on individual dogs. And the priority areas for our worldwide work are humane dog population management, and Vijay's very nicely already just told us all that we are human and we should be humane as well. Thank you, Vijay. That we want to aim towards eradicating rabies. We work on rehoming. We work on education, on trying to end exploitation of dogs, on innovation of new ways of doing things, and helping out in emergencies. So how do Dogs Trust work and how do we operate? We have a large number of different ways that we do operate, and very much we're working at the population level to try and prevent problems happening in the first place. So for example, we have education programs in schools, we have campaigns to the government, and we have a fairly new dog school which has been set up in the UK, where we have local classes that people can take when they've got a new dog, either a puppy or a rescue dog, they can attend. And the aim of those classes is not just to teach people how to do a trick with their dog or how to teach it to sit, but to prevent behaviour problems arising, which may later down the line lead to that dog being given up. We also work with worldwide grants, as I mentioned, and we have a network of rehoming centres in the UK, which are very high standard in terms of welfare for the dogs at the actual centre, but also trying to educate owners through the rehoming process. And fairly recently we've launched a new post-adoption project, which is what I'm part of and where I'm employed, to offer a lot of support to owners when they've adopted a dog from a shelter in Dogs Trust and they take it home. They then have a lot of support from the charity, because what can be quite common is somebody adopts a dog and takes it home and then doesn't have any support, and there can be problems that arise. So we offer a lot of support now to try and make that transition as successful as possible. And because we have so many areas of work, the two which I'm going to focus on are the worldwide grants, because that's what's relevant in India here, and the post-adoption support, as that's the area that I'm working in. So why do we offer support after adoption? Well, we help dogs to settle into their new home, and we help owners to manage problems which can arise, whether that's with the dog's health or with their behaviour. And we optimise their quality of life, so by offering professional advice about how the best way is to look after their dogs, we try to improve dog quality of life once they're in the home. We hope to reduce the risk of dogs being returned if the adoption doesn't work out. And we offer owners veterinary support soon after adoption, after which they have to go to their own veterinarian, as well as lifelong behaviour support. So anybody who takes a dog from the Dogs Trust and adopts it can get lifelong behaviour support from behaviourist experts who work at the Dogs Trust. And this is the team which I'm a part of, the behaviour officer team, and we offer post-adoption support. At the moment there's 6 of us, and it's our full-time job to provide telephone support to owners after they've adopted a dog and taken it home. And we're all qualified behaviourists with various backgrounds, some more from trainer backgrounds, some more from welfare backgrounds. And we speak to owners and can give them lengthy phone calls and behaviour advice over the phone, which they can implement. And how these work is owners are called 2 days after they've adopted the dog. So they go to the shelter, that process of adoption is finished. 2 days later, they are given a phone call from a central team who finds out how everything is going. They also call them 2 weeks after adoption, 4 months and 1 year after adoption. So we have regular follow-up checks to find out how the adoption process is going. And this is why I mentioned that individual level support, because it's very intensive support for those individuals. And if there are any problems that are raised through the questions that we ask, which are standardised on behaviour, then they're referred to our behaviour team, which is my team. And the types of cases that we see, the problems that can arise, can be fearful behaviour, which can result in aggression or anxiety towards the new owner or towards other dogs that they come across when they're out on a walk or in the street. Commonly, we see separation-related behaviours. So dogs are a social species and they may struggle to cope with being alone in the home, especially after the disruption of being in one home and then a kennel and then a new home. They can find that process quite disruptive and find it difficult to be on their own in a new home. And some training issues such as teaching them to go to the toilet outside and not inside the home, which may seem less important to us compared to some of the welfare issues, but they're very important for an owner being willing to keep the dog and for it to work out successfully together, to train them to be in a house rather than a kennel. And how the process works, as a phone advisor, we give them advice on the phone. We may also email them videos or leaflets. We have a lot of resources, again, which are all based on evidence and which have been put together to share with owners in a digestible way, so it's easy for them to understand. We can also refer them on to other people, so we may refer them to their own vet if we think there's a health problem. And many behaviour issues are linked to health, so often there can be an underlying health component. We can refer them to the dog school. If we think it's a training issue, then we have many local dog schools around the UK where they can go to train the dog. We may refer them back to the rehoming centre, either if, unfortunately, the adoption has not worked out, or if they need more practical help, we also have behaviourists who can go out to the home and visit them. As well as we are very fortunate to have a team of clinical animal behaviourists who are very well recognised as experts in this area that provide a visit for the more serious behaviour problems and carry out a consultation, find out what the problem is, offer a behaviour programme for that owner and that dog to work through the problem together with quite intensive support. And all of that is free of charge to the owners who've adopted the dog. Now, Dogs Trust Worldwide is a sister charity of Dogs Trust, so it's separate to the UK organisation, although they're both based in London as the head office. And they've worked internationally for 20 years. They registered as a separate charity in 2016, and as I mentioned, we support local partners with funding and expertise. So not so much that Dogs Trust has their own centres in different places, but they fund local organisations. And the main way this happens is through the Worldwide Grants Programme, and currently we have around 50 projects in 30 countries, and 3 rounds of funding per year, which involves a lot of questions and research to find out who we should fund and why, and a lot of reporting is then required to make sure that the funding is being used appropriately. And if any of you are interested, if you work in dog welfare, you would like to apply for a grant, you can have a look at the website of Dogs Trust, where there's the application form and frequently asked questions here. And we prioritise projects which have a good understanding of the size of the problem, commitment to measuring impact, so using evidence that it's working, and sustainability. The maximum grant is £30,000 for first-time applicants. Unfortunately, we can't fund everybody because, for example, in 2017, we had almost 300 applications, but we're only able to agree 70. So what are the outcomes of our work, and how is Dogs Trust making a difference? Well, in terms of post-adoption support, this started in April, so it's a fairly new project that we are part of and seeing the effects of so far. So it's early days for gathering data, but we also have a research project going on alongside it so we can look at the outcomes and scientifically analyse that. And around 3/4 of adopters are reached by the contact centre, so I mentioned the central team 2 days after adoption. And almost all of those, so 80%, are supported by my team, the central behaviour team, whereas 20% from the rehoming centre teams. And the aim of that is that they can keep support from dogs who they particularly had a close bond or a lot of training happening with, whereas we can take a lot of the burden from the people who are handling the dogs and need to be working with them in the kennels by helping them with these post-adoption calls. And around 500 calls per month are requested and made by the central behaviour team monthly. One example of a worldwide grant of that population level is a Bosnia dog school that we have. So Dogs Trust does have a branch in Bosnia, and the dog school aims to help with basic commands, with positive reinforcement, with helping create the owner and dog bond, and reducing abandonment. And so far, since 2016, 423 dogs have completed the training. Some of the grants which we've given worldwide in India are for various different organisations. For example, for People for Animals in Ghaziabad, helped fund the redevelopment of the kennel room building and separating an open dog area and adoption area. This has already been mentioned, the Federation of Indian Animal Protection Organisations. And one of the ways that Dogs Trust was involved was helping to lobby government and participation in a Supreme Court case aimed at preventing culling of dogs by the local municipalities, which has been supported since 2015. And the court case is ongoing, but it has resulted in halting the mass culling of dogs by local authorities. Some of you may have heard of Mission Rabies, which is one of our main organisations that we're funding to work on reducing and eradicating rabies, because scientific evidence has shown that around 70% of the dog population needs to be vaccinated in an area to eliminate rabies, alongside educating communities about rabies and how to prevent that. And they are one of our largest and most ambitious projects, aiming to eradicate rabies and also to demonstrate the efficiency and the efficacy of mass vaccination instead of culling. And the teams use a mobile application so they can locate each of the dogs that they have caught and vaccinated, so that they understand and they can best track where the dogs are that they've covered and be able to move on to the next location. And in India, they work in Ranchi and in Goa, as well as working in Malawi, in the second largest city. And as mentioned, the education side is very important as well. So while they are vaccinating large numbers, so they vaccinated more than 500,000 dogs so far in India, they're also educating children with youth education officers on the importance of avoiding bites and prevention and protection around rabies, and have educated so far over 900,000 children. We've also provided funding for Help in Suffering in Jaipur, supporting animal birth control programs and rabies vaccination programs. And these have been, since 2015, almost 4,000 dogs have been vaccinated and sterilised just this year so far through this programme. Dogs Trust funds provide support for the worldwide veterinary services, the International Training Centre in Uti, and the training is in surgical sterilisation techniques. And this is for vets as well as vet assistants in how to carry out the procedure, and in some other training programs as well. And so far this year, they've run around 21 training courses, and trained over 250 vets and vet assistants. So we talked about the capacity building being there, and Sajana mentioned that in equines, but this is an example of how they're building capacity in dogs and how that's needed at the veterinary level. As well as the training, they're also sterilising and vaccinating dogs. So they've sterilised over 7,000 dogs so far this year, and also vaccinated almost 14,000 against rabies. We also provide help in emergencies. So for example, in the floods in Kerala early this year, through the FIA PO, we provided funding to help with food and medical aid to dogs who were impacted by the severe floods. And the team was able to help almost 120 dogs in the relief effort, as well as supporting 75 caretakers with emergency rations. And just to give you an idea of the areas that we're funding by geography, so worldwide, obviously the UK work is excluded from this. So the majority of work is in Europe, which is mostly in Eastern Europe. There's also the Asia, would be second fundus, followed by North America and then Africa. And in terms of the percentage of areas priority funded, the population management is the main area that's funded, followed by education, and then rabies and rehoming, followed by innovation and in emergencies. Do you have any questions?
Perception that they see some advertisement in TV, and after some time they want to dump it and say, no, we don't want this. What do you do in such cases, Justin? How do you counsel such kind of situation where a person adopt because of some fancy and then they don't want their dog?
From the UK point of view, we would be having different standards in place to make sure that people are interested in adopting the dog, that they can provide for their needs, mostly sort of resource and input-based measures, but that their lifestyle would be suitable. Dogs Trust, for example, takes back dogs if an owner is no longer able to keep it. So they would take the dog back to their rehoming centre. So owners know that at adoption if it doesn't work out. And so occasionally down the line it does happen that people are then able to return the dog. But that means that Dogs Trust can make sure that the dog is rehomed again and is not ending up on the streets or being abandoned. So that's perhaps one thing to consider, is whether shelters have the capacity to offer to take back a dog rather than it ending up being abandoned. But it does depend very much on the resources available by that organisation. So Dogs Trust is very fortunate that they can do that, and that that's part of their ethos to make sure that those dogs are cared for their whole life.
The organisations to fund. Is there any criteria for choosing the organisations that you fund?
Yes. Priority areas, so it would depend on the priority of what we're looking to fund, as well as sustainability. And so I mentioned as well impact measurements, so making sure that they're able to properly record the before and the after and the results, and as well as the location, so looking at geographical area, what the experiences of the organisation, the capacity, the welfare of the dogs, and whether that's being properly met to a good standard, and how much finance is required.
I sterilize a lot of my own stray dogs. So when you sterilize your own dogs, I mean the ones you know, and you know a specific area, like in my area, I sterilized around 10 dogs, and they were on the road where my house was situated. After some time, I think they become less aggressive, which is good, but then they also start accepting other dogs. And then, from 10 they became 15, and then what is how would you say that this has been controlled, the population is controlled? How?
I mean, the links between behaviour and sterilisation, whether there's a link with aggression is not necessarily that well founded, but certainly there's links between confidence and male dogs being neutered. Female dogs, I think we have very little scientific evidence to show that there are behavioural differences before and after being sterilised. So I would wonder whether that was the reason. But it would also be about looking at the population level and, like you said, whether they're able to move in from other areas And so considering that you need to look at the population as a whole rather than a limited group of animals because they're going to be able to move around.